Hello, my name is Jessica Brondo, and I am currently seeking secondary English certification. Last semester, I spent my practicum experience at Luis Munoz Marin teaching 8th grade, and this semester I experienced student teaching at Newark Vocational High School with self-contained special needs 10th and 11th graders. During my teaching experience, I have come to understand different things about myself, about the strengths and weaknesses that I have measured on a beam scale based on the Super 6 principles. So for each one, I was reflective on what I feel I'm excelling in and what I think I still need to work on. For Principle 1, I have attained mastery in designing effective lesson objectives and presenting accurate content. I worked very closely with my cooperating teacher and other teacher candidates in order to do this effectively. I wanted to show an example from my summative assessment where I implemented a student's poem as part of the assessment so that students would be not only engaged with the materials and connected to them, but also be able to pull out the different elements of a poem. And in order to do that, I had to know exactly what I was looking for them to answer the question. For P1, I feel that I need to improve upon connecting content to future concepts for future learning. And by this, I mean I need to be more explicit about the significance of the lesson. In order to do this, I feel that I can write 2 objectives. This is something that I would have to establish within the beginning of the school year, and it's just something that would be a routine. We would talk about the objective of the day, so the daily objective, and then the objective for tomorrow, so that they'll be able to connect how each lesson is important or vital to the other. This is something that I would want to do within my classroom, and I think that that would really set the standards of significance of the information being conveyed in class. For Principle 2, I attained mastery in recognizing learners' developmental needs and incorporating varied cultural backgrounds. I kept the interest level very high with the content that I selected because I made sure that the students would really connect to it, relate to it, and just enjoy it. Now, I did find that my students were having some difficulty with with reading comprehension, so for a lot of lessons, I incorporated the method of reading for meaning and also many graphic organizers and things to really help flesh out all of these details from the text and give every student the opportunity to achieve mastery. And that's an example I have in my PowerPoint. For Principle 2, my weaknesses would be in incorporating student interest. I think that I need to improve on this, and one way that I could do this would be to talk to other teachers. I need to be able to incorporate student choice, but in a manner that's effective and structured. If student choice is just left out in the open, I think that it can get to be a little bit chaotic, but I think that students should be able to express what kinds of assignments are good for you, what kinds of projects, what kinds of activities work for you, which ones don't. So I would need to really research that either online or, as I said, in person with other educators. For Principle 3, I was very successful at supporting my students' development and empowering them to produce desired outcomes. I would constantly highlight student strengths by giving immediate feedback and helping them improve in all growth areas. So if a student came in on time and ready to work, I always highlighted the fact that that student did that. And it sort of promoted this feeling of other students wanting to emulate that student's behavior. I also would use different types of lessons so that students could demonstrate their mastery or their level of mastery. For example, I have on my PowerPoint an example of visual representation of symbolism. So students were able to draw out the importance of symbolism in Masque of the Red Death. This was my way of showing differentiation, which I feel builds confidence in the students. But to really empower the students and support them, I need to improve on promoting higher level thinking and managing group work. I will do this by improving on the type of questioning that I implement during my lessons. I kept finding that I was here and I really needed to get higher. Instead of just asking basic who, what, where, when, I needed to really ask analytical questions, challenge my students to really get to the next level, and that's something that I feel I need to work on. I also need to work on really being consistent with the norms with classwork in groups. saying, here's your recorder, here's your reporter. Everyone would have a role, and this would be something that's consistently done so that managing group work would be very easy. For Principle 4, I was able to tailor my instruction based on the data that I collected from assessments, and I was also able to use various forms of assessment. I would see that my students were having difficulty with something like open-ended questions, and I was able to then go back into the lesson and say, what do we need to work on? We actually worked on analyzing a question, what is it that they're asking, and then start working on the written responses. I also recognized that my students were having some difficulty with making connections from informational text between self, other text, and the globe. And that's something that's very important, not only in writing essays, but also in standardized testing. So I wanted to really hone in on that skill, and I actually implemented a worksheet from the New York Times, and it was connecting the New York Times to your life. And I have an example of that as well, and students were able to really excel with that. But that was all through reading their responses and realizing we need to focus in on this. For P4, even though I am attaining in the principle that I just talked about, I still feel that I need to improve by using various assessments. I will do this by making all assessments clear and meaningful so students can really demonstrate their level of comprehension. If it's an oral assessment, I need to be very clear and explicit as to what they're saying. I felt that I was making too many overgeneral sort of assumptions about the assessments and whether or not my students understood. I will also incorporate different formats that mirror the PARCC assessment because I want my students to be prepared for this new upcoming test, and the format is a little bit different than how I've been teaching thus far. For Principle 5, I am very successful in creating a classroom with effective and positive standards. This practice also allowed me to achieve mastery in promoting self-motivation, self-respect, and pride, which is so important in a classroom. My students were given feedback on all oral and written work, and then their work was all over my room. It was on every wall. Their feedback was clearly written on it, and it kind of promoted this pride amongst the students where they were very proud to have their work up and visible to all students. We also had a respect policy that I think was really enforced, and it allowed students to take academic risks. If somebody was trying to answer a question and somebody else could help, they would always ask, like, hey, do you mind if I jump in? And I thought that was awesome. And this is also, different things that you have to do in a classroom to promote that type of behavior, that type of relationship. I also included some pictures of my classroom setup, and each setup reflects a different type of learning that would happen, and the students knew right away, oh, we're in groups, we're doing group work, and it sort of got them excited, it kept them on their toes. For Principle 5, to really maintain this effective classroom that I feel that I've created, I really need to improve on managing student behavior and communicating expectations. I can't stress this enough. In the future, class expectations will be posted on the wall. They were there, but I think I need to make them a little more explicit. I will also implement a system to track participation so that all students are engaged and not just some. So this might look like a checklist or maybe just a tally. So-and-so volunteered 4 times, let me get to somebody else. I did implement a checklist for behavior, but I think for participation as well, you need to be able to engage all your students. Lastly, as a professional, I want to continue to accept and provide constructive criticism from and to colleagues, administrators, and all professionals. This is going to help me grow in every single aspect of the Super 6. I want to be able to be successful as an educator and as a colleague and as a coworker. I want to be able to learn something every single day from my students and from other professionals in the building. This is my big takeaway. Work hard, be a lifelong learner, as we've talked about before, and you can be successful as an educator and as an overall professional. I really feel that accepting the fact that you're not perfect, no one's perfect, will make you very successful. And this is how I will improve in all aspects of education. Thank you very much. This concludes my presentation.